Oh, welcome back to the Brain Soul Success Show, everyone, where we take back our power. And you're in for a real treat today. Dr. Paul Rivera is in the house with me. He is an amazing man. He does come from an academic background, but all the things that he's done in his life and what he's doing in his business now. So I'll just introduce him here and then we'll take it away. So he's a catalyst for positive change through a multifaceted career in academia, diplomacy, international economics, and strategic coaching. And as the co-founder of BEAC Change, his mission is to spark profound growth and alignment in individuals, teams, and organizations worldwide. With a PhD in economics from the University of Southern California, Dr. Rivera is a professional in strategic planning, visioning, and systemic methodologies. He's a first-generation American and proud Latino. He's a polyglot and a passionate globetrotter, and he's done a lot of work all over the world. I know you're into public speaking now and coaching, and you've worked with teams and people really all over the world. You've been in my neck of the woods in Albuquerque, working with some people here at Sandia. How did you even get started, like in all of that?
That is a great question. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be on your show, and I'm so glad to be here. Wow, how did I get started? We can go pretty far back with that.
Okay.
As you mentioned, I'm a Latino. My mom is Mexican. My dad is from El Salvador. I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in a very blue collar kind of
Mhm.
family environment, and I was one of those kids who always had a, a vision, a dream of
Mhm.
something different. I never saw my life even as a kid, as I projected my life forward, I never saw it seeming or looking similar to my parents or to those around me. I was always the kid who had something different. It's one of the reasons why, for example, I loved as a kid reading science fiction because it
Okay.
gave me this vision of other worlds and other universes and other possibilities. So from a very, very early age, what I wanted more than anything was to travel. And actually, you may remember this. Um, my hero as a child was Jacques Cousteau. I don't know if you remember Jacques
Oh, I
Cousteau, but
do. Yes.
he had, when I was growing up, he had a TV show.
Mhm.
It was on, late in the week, like Friday, Saturday, and I never ever missed it. And the science was really fun because he's the inventor of modern scuba, so he's somebody who's had a major impact that way. But the science was amazing, but I loved him. I loved how he was so confident and passionate about what he did and kind. And coming from a Latino family, I loved that he was very masculine, but in a
Mhm.
way that I was never shown before. I'd never seen
Oh,
that version of masculinity of a thin
uh-huh.
French guy who wore a red beanie and all of that. And
Uh-huh.
and yet he was masculine in his confidence. He was masculine in his kindness and the way he treated people. So
Mhm.
my as I've thought about my life, so much of it comes from those origins, that was always inside of me. And those were the things that I wanted to do. And that's how I've lived my life. So becoming a professor, going into academia, I always wanted to be a positive voice. I wanted to be a positive influence on my community, create possibilities for people
Mhm.
who may not have thought that they had possibilities. I wanted people to be the same as me, right? To
I
to
love
be
that.
able to take that vision that they had and to turn it into reality. And so my career progressed from there. I got to a point where I realized I wanted to do that, but on a global scale. And that's what pushed me into international diplomacy and specifically into
Mhm.
humanitarian assistance. So I've had the opportunity to work all over the world, empowering people and
Mhm.
communities and organizations to create their strategic missions and visions and to carry them out and to do the good work in the world that they want to do. And I
Mhm.
realized the greatest thing for me was doing this along with my wife, whose her profile is very similar to mine. And we create a kind of collective power together. I bring
Oh,
certain skills and
nice.
she brings certain skills. And when we come together, that's when the real magic happens. And really that was the inspiration for us to create BEAC Change, our organization that now as you mentioned, we work with individuals, with teams, with organizations to help them conceive of their mission, vision, and purpose and to that highest aspiration and to learn to live, to carry it out.
I love that. And I love your big vision. And thank you for sharing your story, of where that started too. Because I always believe that what we did as kids, we actually then create later if we really watch what our kids do. And I tell the story that, I was a teacher too. So I was a special ed teacher. But when I was 6 years old, I taught my best friend Susie everything that I learned. And she skipped a grade. And we got to be in the same class in third and fourth grade. So
That's
we played
amazing.
school and then we played spy. So we spied on my brother, and the treehouse was our headquarters. How cool is that? And we weren't supposed to go up there because it was this little tiny ladder that went all the way up to this top of this tree. But we went up there anyway. We snuck up there, and so we'd spy on my brother. So she became a cop and I became a teacher. Right?
That's amazing. What a great story. I love
Yeah.
that.
So, so I love to hear the background stories because we don't even realize how much that does project what we do later. But you have a big vision. I love your vision, you and your wife, and what you're doing.
I,
It's
I will
awesome.
I will tell you that just to that you bring up children and childhood, and it's really fascinating because we do a lot of our exercises around mission, vision, purpose, understanding your superpower as an individual and the gift that you bring to the world and all of that. And we've
Mhm.
actually done that exercise with children as young as second graders. We'll go into the schools and we do this exercise with the kids. What's
Nice.
so fascinating is that these children, these second graders, have a very clear understanding of what are the problems that exist in the world and how it is that they would want to go about starting to solve those problems. Is really fascinating. The second graders have drawn us pictures of, these water cycle things because they believe that clean water is really important and all of that. And or my son is obsessed with air. He loves clean air. A couple of years ago, we had the chance to go to Switzerland, and it was heaven for him because the air was clean there. And the same thing, we've done that exercise with him, and he talks about his ideas for how it is that you go about beginning to clean the air. And the thing is that what's really interesting is that those steps of how they go about starting to create that change,
Mhm.
it's your how to. It's the way that you approach problems in the world, and it's something that you carry forward for a long time. What's
Mhm.
fascinating though is that we also do these same exercises with kids that are just 2 or 3 years older. So by the time they're hitting fourth and fifth grade, what's
Mhm.
really fascinating is that children start to feel the influence of media, of society, of their parents, and their answers to the questions, while still very nice and positive, become much more formulaic. They're You can tell that they're telling us what they think we want to hear from them rather than
Oh.
giving us their authentic answers. And it's really, really interesting. So much of the work that we do with adults later in life,
Mhm.
the reason we go back to that early childhood concept is because
Yes.
it's always been there. And there's been so many forces that have been trying to repress that in us. So that reawakening, that reconnection with your cores is so important and so strong. And it's one of the reasons why I tell people all the time, you can't underestimate children because they have knowledge, they have wisdom even that's
Yep.
inside of them. And our job is to really help foster that in them.
Absolutely, and that is our job. Absolutely. And I think some of those second graders could be the, future leaders of our country. Too bad we
Man,
can't like grow them up right now.
exactly.
You know, because we need that wisdom, right?
Yes.
We need that wisdom. I do very similar but different in that I get people back to being 100% their soul truth. Because I find when they do get to that core, like you're talking about, that's when they can really use their gift in the world
Yeah.
and really shine. And
Yeah.
and it sounds like you're bringing them back to that gift by bringing them back to childhood and having them reflect on that and pulling that out of them so that they can be their authentic self. And that's how they're going to make the changes that they want and the impact that they want to make in the world.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah, it's really,
Yeah.
really important. Wow, I love this. It's so interesting because it doesn't matter what background people come from or where they are or what they're really doing in their business. There's alignment between all businesses across the board. People want to help people,
Yeah.
right? And there's similarities between how that happens and yet definitely differences. For sure. Give us an example of like a corporation or a group or somebody that you worked with. and did some of that work with, and what happened when you did that?
So I'm it's a very large corporation.
Okay.
I think they would prefer that I not name them directly, but it's
Okay.
a very large corporation. This particular branch of theirs was located in Ohio. We went to work with them in Ohio, and in
Mhm.
particular, one of their teams. And it's a very interesting team, and in fact, a very interesting company, because having come from the world of diplomacy, I know how embassies work, for example. And
Okay.
walking into this very large corporation felt like walking into an embassy. You had to have a badge. You had to have a security kind of workshop before they allowed you in.
Mhm.
Your badge was coded by color, depending on who you were and what your status was within the organization. So we went to work with this team that was basically imploding. It was underperforming. And they were a pivotal part of this particular organization. The team was made up of a leader, a couple of deputies, and then sort of the worker bees. And what
Okay.
was tough, and so and you could see it, that hierarchy was really obvious because each one of them has a different color badge, and you know who are the worker bees and you know who are the leaders.
Mhm.
And there was a tremendous amount of frustration. So there were leadership decisions that were being made
Mhm.
that the people who had to carry them out and live them and implement them had no say in them.
Oh. Mhm.
And so it created a great deal of tension, right? Because the folks who were doing the work and carrying it out had to live with consequences that were not of their making. Um, and the company was struggling because the company itself understood that they had made investments that weren't paying off, but they felt invested in the investments and didn't want to just pull the plug. So there were all these forces that were competing against each other, but
Mhm.
nobody was talking together. There had been no sitting at the table. One,
Mhm.
two,
Mhm.
there had been no acknowledgement that people who were not leadership actually had leadership capacity and leadership skills. And that was
Mm.
really tough. So we went in with this to this company. Our approach is always, and I think I mentioned to you before we actually got online, was that our approach is very individual. We're very one-on-one. So one
Mhm.
of the things that we did first is we talked to everyone from top to bottom.
Top to bottom.
We talked to everyone, um, ask them about their superpowers. What do you bring? Tell me about you. And then, all sorts of questions. And then what we realized when we brought everyone together was leadership was missing out. Leadership had an information gap. There wasn't that communication from the working crew up to them in
Mhm.
terms of feeding the information to make the decisions that they had. There wasn't the communication from leadership down in terms of this is what we think is a good strategy. What do you all think? There was never that questioning. And then there
Mhm.
was never even any sort of bilateral discussion at the higher corporate level in terms of mission and vision and objectives and all of that. So we had we ended up spending several weeks with them, actually,
Mhm.
which was fantastic. And we really got to know the teams. And in the end, what happened, one was a significant realignment in terms of how it is that they organized themselves. We realized that there were a lot of people who, because once we got to know what their superpower was, what they actually brought to the organization, that they were in the wrong place, they were in the wrong position. One, two,
Nice.
we helped them create a management system that was a bit more distributed, in the
Mhm.
sense that it allowed for a much more free and authentic information flow.
Nice.
Third, we
Yeah.
created a way to have that conversation with the larger corporate entity. And they thankfully, they finally did the smart thing as an organization, which is that they bit the bullet on the investment that hadn't paid off. They had to throw that away. They had to go back,
Mhm.
or not go back. They had to create a new system that actually worked and actually had buy-in from the folks across the team. And it was the
Yeah.
greatest thing that they did, because within just a couple of months, they had recovered not only the investment that they lost, but had soared far beyond in
Yeah.
performance. At the
Mhm.
same time, the morale was much higher, the communication was higher. We helped them create avenues for promotion, which a lot of the worker bee type folks had never had before. So,
Ah,
it's all of that. But all of that starts with getting to know the person, getting to know the individual, what they bring, what they see as their contribution to the organization, and helping them bring that out as much as possible.
I love that. That's such a great thing you did there. Really aligning them. So much is communication, isn't it?
So
So
much,
much is
not
communication.
from your personal life all the way to your professional life to your spiritual life. All of that is about communication.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm a brain expert, and this is the Brain Soul Success Show. And so I always think about, how the brain is involved in all of that. I mean, there's so many, uh, things we could say about that, not just your brain power and your team going in and helping them, but getting into the brains of all those people and really helping them see their gift, right? And then being able to contribute it to the organization. And then I always think of how it becomes almost like one brain, Paul, almost like that. And that sounds like what you did there so brilliantly, is you help them become aligned in their one brain, their one mission.
Our message always is about collective power, and collective
Hmm.
power comes when when each individual values themselves and understands their contribution. And then because of that, what that does is it helps take away my imposter syndrome, my anxiety, and my need to compete with the other person. Right. So
Yes.
once we start to create that culture where each person understands their value, the logical and so much easier step is to say, hey, I have this superpower. Look at your superpower. What happens when we bring those
Yes.
together and we start to create that collective power? And it becomes a much more organic process because it comes from them. And those aha moments that happen in those groups and in those teams, and we run retreats and all sorts of things like that,
Mhm.
where you have those moments where people flash, and almost the second that they are able to vocalize my superpower is, and they can say it and feel it, the immediate next thing is to start seeing everyone else's superpower too. And it's this incredible synergy that happens. And in fact, that collective brain, as you say, is actually more than the sum of its parts. Right? It's
Yes.
not just all of our brains put together. It's that together we create something that neither you nor I could, and it's greater than both of those things.
Absolutely. That's what I love. I love my community. I love what we've been able to do with my community. And so, oh, my light just went off. And yeah, and it's the collective brain. It's
Yeah.
definitely the collective brain that I feel. Well, you're very smart. You have an awesome brain. But have you ever had a big challenge in your life, either with your business or personally, that really affected you?
Sometimes the brain is the problem. Sometimes, and I'll tell you this, so I I grew up, as I mentioned, I grew up in a Latino family, Latino household. And what that means is that, for example, there were a lot of cultural expectations put on
Mhm.
me in terms of what a man is, how a man should act, how a man should behave. And I talk about this pretty often, but there's this machismo that is expected of you. And it means in a lot of ways that you are expected always to be strong or to appear strong
Prepare
and
strong.
invulnerable.
Mhm.
And the truth is that that's not always the case, right? There are days, there are times, there are situations where you feel vulnerable, where you question your worth and your value and your ability. And
Mhm.
yet, because of a lot of that, it's not something that is okay for us to communicate. It's not okay for us to say, to vocalize, I'm not okay, to
Right.
vocalize, I'm struggling with this, right? And so there have been a lot of times in my personal life.
Mhm.
For, I mentioned my wife earlier. I was married once before,
Mhm.
and I know that a part of the failure of that relationship was my inability to communicate at that time, to really
Mhm.
say the things that were truly on my mind or in my heart. And by contrast, also in our entrepreneurial journey, there are times when we're not sure. we've never done this before. You know, as I said, I've come from academia and diplomacy, and we launched into entrepreneurship. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of questions there. Even as an economist, even as somebody who used to teach MBA, there's a difference between that and now it's you and your money and your reputation and your time that's on the line. So
Sure.
the question is, the question was sort of, how did I deal with it and how did I sort of move through that?
Yeah.
Um, at this point in my life, I can answer that much more confidently than I could have in my past, because I think
Mhm.
in the past I stumbled through a lot of those things, frankly.
Sure.
If I When I see my challenges now, though, I realize that one of the things that came from cultural influence, from all sorts of things, was a disconnection with my own intuition.
Ah,
And
that's such a
so
good comment. Yes.
such a big part of my
Mhm.
not only resilience but ability to spring forward has come from getting in touch with my intuition.
Mhm.
And it means a lot of different things. I'm not a particularly religious person per
Mhm.
se, but I have come to become a strong believer in this idea of energy and the energy that connects us as
Mhm.
people, as living things, and our interaction with the environment. And so for me, what has been truly transformational has been learning how to do breath work. And
Nice.
it's something that has helped me,
Mhm.
one, calm the noise that's around me and allow me to focus inwardly on myself and the things that matter to me, but
Mhm.
also something that allows me to, it's actually very physical. It really allows me to feel my energy and allows me to feel the energy around me
Mhm.
and allows me to have the clarity to listen to the voice inside of me. So I talked
Beautiful.
earlier in the podcast about,
Mhm.
for example, that I always, even as a child, had that voice pushing me to want to travel and do different things.
Mhm.
The second part of that story is that, especially as a child and as an adolescent and a young man, there were so many times where I silenced that voice. As much as I've
Mhm.
done, and as much, there was,
Yes.
for every one thing that I did, there were 100 things that I silenced and I put that down. And now I realize that I wish I had the resources then to have been able to get in touch with that inner wisdom that I had, so that I knew really which are the things that I wanted to push on, and to really have that conviction to advance the things that were so important to me. And so now, whenever I have a struggle,
Mhm.
for example, I know that my wife Esther is a very open and accepting, and truth and honesty is one of her core values. So
Mhm.
on a day that I'm not feeling well, the worst thing that I could do is to hide it from her. Right. So I
Sure.
have that, and that speaks to my intuition, and I'm able to say to her, today's not my day, and we can have that conversation. Just being able to say that, right, is a weight off of your shoulders, right? But
Absolutely.
at the same time, at the business level, it's something that we do together. And and being able to tap into that intuition, as a business owner, you have these ideas, you have this vision for what
Mhm.
it could be. And being
Yes.
able to tap into that intuition helps give you the clarity that, yes, this is the right decision for me. This is the direction I want to go. This is
Mhm.
what is aligned to me. And it's such a relief, really, to be able to say, yes, that's what I thought, that's what I felt, and that's what we're going to do,
And that's what we're gonna do. I'm so
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just gonna say I'm so proud of you. Congratulations. You're so speaking my language because I do energy work. Like I do
Yeah.
the energy of the brain, and I believe everything is energy. And any way that we can teach people, and that's what my system does, my brain system is pulls people in to be able to tap into their intuition and then trust it.
Yeah.
And, on that same frame, years ago when I started biofeedback, so this is 25 years ago, people came back after I hooked them up to biofeedback. And at that time, there were wires. It was all in person, reach wrist, yanking, and it was a biofeedback bioresonance program. And I watched after 3 or 4 sessions, they'd come back and they were listening to their intuition better.
Yeah.
And at the time, I wanted to create a bumper sticker that said, following your intuition and trusting it is the path to healing anything. That's what you're saying.
That's amazing. I love that.
Right? That's exactly what you're saying. You're saying when you learned to do that and you trusted it, everything started to shift and change for you in your
Yeah.
personal life and in your business. So, I know that that's also what you're teaching people when you go into work with teams.
Yes.
How
Yes.
beautiful is
It's
that,
a
Paul?
it's a great thing. And I will tell you, I mentioned I've worked all over the world. I've worked
Mhm,
with people of every age, of every color, of every religion, of every language. And what's amazing is that when you approach people with that understanding of the energetic alignment,
mhm,
the importance of any other differences really fades out. And it's something
mhm,
that it's a perspective that allows you to see people for who they are and what the intentions that they bring and the value that they bring to any situation, and that anything else is detail, it's flair in a lot of ways, and it really allows you to focus on the core humanity that people have. And it's something that has opened doors for me all over the world, because I've
yes.
had so many people from all over the world say to us, for example, we've tried this kind of work before, and there wasn't the impact because there wasn't the trust with the person who was working with us. And they as they start to understand it, they realize that energetic alignment is really, really important. Somebody could be saying to you the right things, but if you're not feeling it, and if you're not feeling that safety in that space,
Mhm,
it's really hard to make that progress. So the energy part, I think, is something that we overlook a
mhm.
lot of times, and it's so crucial to creating that space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everything is energy.
Yeah.
Everything is energy. So it sounds like you do such a great job of really helping people get to that place of understanding that and then also trusting. You're good at you're a good communicator, so you're good at building trust. And the way you build trust is also being your authentic you,
Right.
being 100% your soul's truth. So it's that inner work that reflects in the outer.
That's correct. And that's correct. And
You
that's
know?
the hard part. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of folks who are afraid to live as their authentic self and present as their authentic self. And there are so many reasons.
Yes.
There are people who have been punished, frankly, chastised, belittled for who their authentic self is. And so I know that there's so much trauma around that.
Hmm.
And yet that's a crucial step on the path to healing as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's what I take people through. And then usually their intuition and their trust of their intuition raises
Yes.
once we do some processes. It sounds like you do the same thing with those amazing teams that you get to work with.
The nicest thing for me actually is also working with a lot of the university students. I work with a
Oh,
lot of
yes.
university students as well, and primarily Latino students of color, a lot of women also. And it's
Mhm,
really interesting. My wife and I are a duo, and at the same time, I what we find is that she has a lot of impact on men, and I have a lot of impact on women, especially from our culture, because they're not
beautiful.
not often used to having the men in their lives be positive in that
Mhm,
way,
mhm.
to acknowledge their value in that way, and to uplift them in that way. And it's really fascinating to see that that impact on a lot of these young students who start to visualize themselves in a way that had never, I think that they had always secretly wanted, but hadn't had that external validation of their value, their worth, and their superpower, and what they bring, and how they could present as their authentic selves. And sometimes for a lot of women, their authentic self, for example, is to be a leader. There are a lot of women out there who are leaders,
Mhm.
and there are societal forces that sometimes don't want them to present that way. But living that authenticity for them is so liberating. And there's nothing like watching a woman who's had brilliant ideas, who's super well educated, be placed in that situation where she's able to grow and to thrive. as a business person, as a professional. It's amazing, you know?
Oh, I love that. And I
Yeah.
love that you get to work with the college students. What a great
Yes,
time to empower them, to give them that confidence to move forward, to
exactly.
really do their dream, and allow their gift to shine. Wow, doing such amazing, amazing work out there. And I know you spoke about breath work.
Yes.
If you were going to give us another sort of self-care tip here, what would you say that is? What do you do for yourself, Paul, when you're
Okay.
not working? When you're not working.
I work a lot, so that's that's one side. Um, I will tell you. So there's a couple of things. I one side is very personal to me. So
Okay.
I come from, as I said, that blue collar mentality.
Mhm.
And the nice thing, the thing that I appreciate about the blue collar mentality is there is the satisfaction of having done something, created something tangible. It's a very satisfying feeling. Like I think about my dad. My dad's a mechanic,
Yeah.
retired now, but he's a mechanic in his soul, right? He's the person for whom his job was exactly what he should have been doing his whole life. Um, and he loved it because when he would come home in the evening, we'd say, Dad, what did you do today? And the answer was always a variant of, there was a thing that was broken and I fixed it. Right. And
Exactly.
that he was, he was a mechanic. He was a diesel mechanic. So he repaired buses. Right. But anything, my dad can fix anything. I mean, that's always his thing because it feels good to make something, to do something. Right.
Mhm.
My life is very different. Right. My work is my mind and speaking and words, but it doesn't take away that I love to make things. So for me, it's cooking. I love to cook. I love the
Oh,
process
nice.
of putting things together and creating something amazing. And it's part of my self-care, right? It's a big piece. I don't do it just because my family eats it, but because it's part of my self-care. It's something that allows me to feel that tangible accomplishment. It's something that allows me to feel sometimes a modicum of control
Mhm.
in spaces where things are chaotic. Sometimes I have to focus on this. It's almost a kind of meditation, right? So that's one thing.
I
the other
love it.
thing the other thing more generally that I would say, though, is we meet a lot of folks that are struggling somehow, and a lot of them are struggling in silence. They haven't necessarily been in spaces where they feel safe to talk about things.
Sure.
First thing that I tell people who are going through things like that is that you have to give yourself a little bit of grace. You need to
Mhm.
be a little bit kind to yourself. Those of us
Mhm.
who have been raised to be high achievers, basically, we put so much pressure on ourselves. We are our own worst critics, worst enemies, and it's really important for us to every now and then say, you know what, it's okay. I it's okay. And to step back for a second and to realize that you need to reprioritize sometimes,
Mhm.
and that
Mhm.
sometimes reprioritizing means, for once in your life, putting yourself first for a little
Mhm.
while, putting your well-being at the forefront, and then not rushing it. So one of the things that we tell our clients all the time is that people overestimate what what can happen in a year, and they underestimate what can happen in 5 years. So a lot of folks embark on these self-care journeys of some sort, and they
Mhm.
expect immediate results. And then they think, a year from now, I'm going to be a completely different person. And within the first couple of months, they don't see the progress that they had hoped for. And they go, oh, this stuff doesn't work. And they drop
Exactly.
it. Right.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
if you start with
Yes.
small steps, and I mean tiny steps sometimes, start with them. Second, celebrate them. Even the small
Yes.
steps, you have to every now and then step back and say, wow, I did that. And I'm proud of myself. Write it down. We actually, one of the things we have our clients do is create a celebration calendar. These calendars that you get from like the bank or the we get them all the time from the environmental associations and all. Every December they send you a calendar for the next year. We use
Mhm.
them as our celebration calendar. Every day,
Great
something to
idea.
celebrate, something that made you feel good, something,
Yes.
a small win, no matter how small. And what happens when you start to do that? over time, those things snowball. And then you get to look back and go, man, look where I used to be. Look where I am now. You do that for 5 years, that change that you had envisioned for yourself, I promise you will have happened because you will have created change and momentum that goes along with that.
That is such a great I love the celebration calendar idea.
Yes.
Um, I've done affirmations or intention I call them intentions for years, and they're index cards.
Yep.
And I write them on one of those little spiral bound ones now, and I flip it, and I date them, and I can look back and see the progress.
Yeah.
But I teach people, here's the brain connection to that. When you celebrate a win, the brain registers that, and it's looking for more now.
Right.
So it does help you create momentum, much like an athlete who finally achieves their goal. They're on the way to the Olympics, right? And now they ran so fast and they beat their time. Now the brain goes, yay, I did that. And then it wants to do it again, right? Yeah,
Correct. Exactly.
absolutely. I love that celebration calendar. How very cool is that? Wow. We are so aligned, and I love your visioning, your methodologies, everything you've shared here today. I don't know. I think we're gonna have to get together again because this has been fun.
Let's do it. I'm ready anytime. This is great.
It's just yeah, it's just so, so completely awesome. Hey, if you were gonna leave, besides your celebration, well, you've already done that. I was gonna say leave us with a brain tip, but I like that one.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big one.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great brain trip. I know you also want to do some more public speaking. Tell us about that and how, our audience listening here maybe can, refer you to other people or help you here too in some way. Give us some ideas on what your next step is in your business and your entrepreneurial journey here.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we do a lot of work with corporate teams and that sort of thing. But we also try to, as much as our work is very individual and we try to center on individuals, we also try to expand our reach as well. So we're trying to get a
Mhm.
little bit of everything. So we've done some really, really fun sort of different kinds of corporate speaking and different at different conferences, talking to Latino groups and mental health groups.
Mhm.
We do a lot of ERG type conversations, and it's really fun because Esther and I do them together. And so we literally deliver joint keynotes and joint workshops, which is something that is really rare. Most folks have never seen that before, that there's a joint keynote address that two people give together.
Mhm.
And we do that because it's our collective power, right? As I said, we have complementary perspectives and complementary skills, and we want to bring that to the stage. And that's the sort of work that we're looking for a little bit more, to have a few
Okay.
more of those opportunities. Speaking to universities, we've had, I think, some of the best work that we've done has been conferences of teachers in different states, and
Mhm.
that is so rewarding because what we end up giving our pitch and talking about our work and how that relates to so many of their students. And the best is hearing back from a lot of those teachers who have taken what we said and used it in their classroom and saw how it transformed these kids. So
Right.
that's the sort of work that we're trying to do. We actually just recently formed a nonprofit arm of BEAC Change. It's called the BEAC Change movement. And
Okay.
so our what our model for that is that we are trying to we created the nonprofit because we want to raise money to fund the purchases of our workbook that would then go into the schools, and we would give our time for free. So that's our model that we want to do much more of this work with schools and universities, donating our time, but having someone fund the books that then leaves these kids with a tangible, a workbook, a thing where they have actually interacted with and started to unpack their mission, their vision, their purpose, their alignment, and starting to
Mhm.
create that path for the life that they want to lead.
I love that. That's so awesome. Gosh, what a great mission. Well, we want to help you here on that mission. So if you're listening today, definitely reach out to Paul here. How can people get a hold of you, Paul, or give us your
We're,
website and your info?
we're pretty easy to get a hold of. We have a website, beactchange.com. You'll see myself and Esther all over it. We have a nice Instagram, which is b.act.change. And you can find me. I'm most active on LinkedIn. If you look up Dr. Paul Rivera, you can find me pretty quickly.
Oh, that's so awesome. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been such a delight getting to know you. I love this. We're so aligned. So again, thank you so much for being with us. And remember, everyone, follow your heart, but take your brain with you.